Hello everyone, my name is Richa Mahajan, Assistant Professor from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Jagannath University, Jaipur. Today, my topic is macro photography. There is a whole world that exists under your feet: insects, tiny plants, and many more. In this lecture, we will get very close to this tiny world and look at what often seem to be the alien life forms that live there. Macrophotography is what lets us see into this normally unseen place. To get good macro shots, we will discuss depth of field, supplemental light sources in detail. Gear for macro photography. Gear is the camera or equipment you are using for the photography. There are hundreds of macro photography rigs available, often customized, but keep in mind that technology changes constantly, and some of the things you will use are not necessarily part of the newest, most advanced system. A ring light that fits over the end of the lens illuminates small subjects as well. Small extension tubes help gets get the lens away from the body of the camera, enabling you to zoom in a bit more even if you are using a macro lens. Probably the best setup is a tripod with a macro lens and a cable release and light introduced with a flash and a softbox. You can also try a small light dome that mounts on the flash. If your subject is likely to move, it helps to have an autofocus macro lens, but you won't need one for photographing flower. Shallow depth of field. Of course, close-up photos have shallow depth of field. The closer you get, the less you will be in focus in your shots. You can think of a macro lens as a telephoto lens in miniature for two reasons. First is you have a shallow depth of field when you are in very close, and second is the image is prone to camera shake and movement because you are magnifying the subject so much. These are both factors to be careful of. The shallow depth of field makes it harder to choose a spot to focus on, but it also blurs out the backgrounds, allowing you to bring your subject forward and soften it. In a close shot of a bouquet of flowers, there is just a hint of color and the suggestion of the flowers in the background. To correct for the shallow depth of field that's inherent in macro photography, use a lot of light and set the aperture very small, f by 22, f by 36, or even f by 45. Gather the available light with long exposure using a tripod and a cable release. Steadying the camera with a tripod when you are using a macro lens is just as important as it is when you are using a larger, heavier lens such as a 600 mm telephoto. You also need to use a cable release because with a macro lens, even the slightest movement will throw your subject wildlife out of focus. You may even need to steady the subject itself by surrounding it with a box or a portable shooting tent. Next is light for light sources for macro photography. The biggest challenge in macro photography is to get all the depth of field you can. If you are not working with tripod, you need to add some light to the situation and increase the aperture. Among the light sources you can use are flashlights, reflected sunlight, and store bought reflectors, especially a gold reflector. On a sunny day, find a flower shaded and then use the gold reflector to add soft, warm light. It almost looks like firelight in the middle of the day. Of course, flash is the fastest and most reliable way to add lots of light to macro shots, and it freezes action. Flash can be must when photographing small creatures that are moving. Next is a handheld softbox with a flash will enable you to use a smaller hole in the lens and greatly increase the depth of field. It also gives off a fabulous quality of light. You can even try you can even try putting a tissue over the end of your lens to diffuse the light. As we have said, the closer the light is to your subject, the softer it will be. Macro photography offers an excellent opportunity to see how elegant electronic flash can be when used well. The alternative to a softbox is an index card or even your shirt, anything that you can bounce light off and onto your subject. A ring light that fits around the lens is useful in situations where the lens itself is shading the subject. Consider having light come at your subject from an angle just as you would if you were shooting a big scene. This allows you to get more shadows and gives depth and dimension to your pictures. Relatively inexpensive studio lighting kits are available that include a power pack, several flash heads with soft boxes, and light stands. Such a kit packs easily into a suitcase and can be used for both large scale and macro photography. Next is this specific delivery vehicle for light is not important. What matters is having light enough light to give you plenty of depth of field. Put small creature or plant Put small creatures or plants against a black or white background. Put the light off to the side and shoot them with a macro lens. Your viewers will see the beauty in these tiny living things. Next is additional tips for macro shooting. Everyone thinks about flowers and insects when they think about macro, but you can go beyond that by shooting close-ups of the parts of the larger subjects such as eyes, teeth, jewelry, or money. This technique allows you to show common things in a new and intimate way. In macro work, holding relatively still both on your end and your subjects is fairly important because there is so little focus depth if you are using only ambient light. Next is a series of photos of a box of chocolates shows the effects you can get by experimenting with a flash, a soft box, and a gold reflector. A really quite a simple lighting system, especially when you need depth of field. Use flash and a soft box. Never try macro photography in harsh light or really bright direct sun because the shadows will be too prominent. It's easy enough to shade the small subjects you are working with. A pair of photographs of a toad again shows the difference in depth of field and detail you can achieve by using flash and a softbox. Always remember, always remember that even in the world of macro, the regular rules of composition still apply, even with little depth of field. Keep your backgrounds clean and don't be afraid to experiment with abstract composition in macro work. Common mistakes in macro photography include not lighting the subject well, not getting enough depth of field, and not getting low enough not getting low enough to be where the action is in the macro world. Whether you are shooting a turtle, a gecko, or a grasshopper, you want to be eye to eye with your subject. That's all for tomorrow. Thank you so much.